Welcome to the League of Women Voters debate for selectmen in Rockport, Massachusetts via Zoom. I'm Hannah Kimberley, and I'm a resident of Gloucester and the president of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann and your moderator tonight. So the League of Women Voters is pleased to bring you a debate among 5 candidates for the Board of Selectmen in Rockport. Early voting begins Saturday, June 12th at 8 a.m. There's also early voting on Monday, June 14th and Tuesday, June 15th. And the Rockport town election is Tuesday, June 22nd. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization for people of all genders, which encourages the informed and active participation of all citizens in government. One way we do this is by presenting candidates directly to you, the voters, in a fair and equal format. We hope that over the course of the program, you'll learn more about each candidate and what they hope to do for the town. There will be no formal opening statements from the candidates, but there will be closing statements of 2 minutes each. I'll be asking questions prepared by the League of Women Voters, which the candidates have not seen. So the format will be to discuss each question for 8 to 12 minutes. And each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to speak, after which, if we have time, candidates may answer each other for 30 seconds. Just raise your hand to speak. Let's see. Oh, if you speak close to the 1.5 minute mark, our timekeeper will give you a 10-second warning. And once you get that warning, I just ask that you finish your sentence, the sentence that you are on. Since our goal is to include as many different issues as possible, I ask that you all keep to the specific subject for each question. Also, please keep yourself on mute while other candidates are speaking, and then unmute yourself to speak. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. Let me just pull up your bios. Okay, so we'll start with Ruth C. George, who is a candidate for re-election. Ms. George is a lifelong resident of Rockport, a homeowner, and a graduate of Rockport High School. She graduated from Boston University School of Nursing and worked at Addison Gilbert Emergency Department as an RN/manager for 44 years, retiring 6 years ago. She still works in nursing, doing private home care and at the emergency department for the ED Physicians Group. Her family all live in Rockport, and she currently has family in the Rockport schools. As a lifelong resident, she has a deep love of Rockport and is proud to call this her hometown. She's proven continued community involvement in town committees and activities representing Rockporters. She wants to continue that involvement in the selectman role if reelected. As a long-term manager of Addison Gilbert Hospital Emergency Department, she has experience in assessing situations and making decisions. She is a listener. She is committed to all Rockport citizens, families, and the aging population. She's dedicated to make Rockport a continued and wonderful place to live, raise a family, and retire in. She says, quote, "We are all here in Rockport because it is a beautiful small town that is safe and community and family oriented. I never want to lose that feel of Rockport." All right, our next candidate is Herman Lija. Herman is a 3rd-generation Rockport resident. He was born in Pigeon Cove, educated in the Rockport schools through the 8th grade, and is a graduate of Gloucester High School. He is a graduate of Bates College with advanced degrees from West Virginia University and the University of North Carolina. He is a retired toxicologist who spent 30 years directing studies relating to cancer causation and the development of therapeutic medicines for the pharmaceutical industry. He returned permanently to Rockport in 2010 and has since served as a member and now chair of Spear & Lodge, a member and chair for 5 years of the Rockport Planning Board, and currently serves as the Planning Board representative on the CPC. His community service outside of Rockport included serving as the president of Hampshire Nursery School for 2 years in Hanover, New Hampshire, the chair of Holden Endowment for Learning for 2 years in Holden, Massachusetts, and a soccer coach for 8 years in Holden, Massachusetts. He looks forward to combining his academic and professional approaches and his planning board experience as a member of the Board of Selectmen. Next up, we have Craig Morrill, experience, Rockport Board of Selectmen, Rockport Ambulance Committee, Rockport Fire Department, Boston Department of Health and Hospitals, Northeastern University graduate / paramedic, past faculty BU, students of School of Medicine. Currently 32 years as Rockport business owner and Gloucester Elks Board of Director. His tagline is responsible government with common sense. Next, we have Michael Paulison. He lists commercial fishery specialist, commercial fisherman, operated Pigeon Cove Marine Services, previous member Rockport Harbor Advisory Committee, previous member Rockport Harbor Planning Committee, previous director Cape Ann Commercial Fishermen's Loan Fund, graduate Gloucester High School, attended Essex Agricultural and Technical Institute, various types of technical training, US Army veteran, independent voter, no political affiliations. His goal is to move Rockport forward for the best interest of its citizens and taxpayers and strive for fiscal restraint and in a responsible manner. All caps, he says, spend less and lower taxes. Lastly, we have Sarah J. Wilkinson, who is also a candidate for re-election. Sarah and her husband Greg live on Highview Road with their two sons, Wyatt and Finn, who attend Rockport Public Schools. Sarah was first elected to the Board of Selectmen in May 2006. She's been elected chairwoman 4 times. She served on the town's Capital Improvement Planning Committee and acted as liaison to several boards and committees, including the School Committee, Finance Committee, DPW, and Council on Aging. Sarah is currently leading the town's reopening committee, supporting businesses and residents as we emerge from the pandemic. Sarah grew up in Rockport and received her BS from UMass Amherst and her MBA from Suffolk University. She currently owns her own property management business. In addition to being on the Board of Selectmen, Sarah is on the Board of Directors for the CCB Foundation, providing education, hope, and support for people affected by addiction. She's the Vice Commodore of the Sandy Bay Yacht Club and the Vice President of the Sandy Bay Sailing Program and Scholarship Fund, a nonprofit working to give kids access to the ocean. If she isn't in a meeting, you can find Sarah cheering her boys on at Little League game or fishing for striped bass in Sandy Bay. Okay, so those are our introductions. Let's start off with question 1, which is, what is the first thing you want to accomplish during your first 6 months in office? What is the first thing you want to accomplish during your first 6 months in office? And we'll start with Ms. George.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having us this evening. For my first 6 months, if I get reelected for my next term, I think the most pressing thing for me right now is to continue working on the DPW Building Facility Committee. We are in a holding pattern right now. We got approval from the citizens a year ago for $12 million to build a new much needed DPW facility. We put it out to bid and it came in $2 million over budget. So we are doing value analysis on it now, trying to work on looking at ways to make this work within our budget, and just getting that off the ground. We need to submit it. We will be going out to bid hopefully in July. We're looking at the market. As you know, during COVID, everything has escalated unbelievable in building. And so that's the biggest thing we need to work on in Rockport, is to get that out to bid and to be able to break ground and start that building for the town.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lilia, what's the first thing you want to accomplish during your first 6 months in office?
So clearly, my first step would be to better understand the interaction of the Board of Selectmen with all of the major groups in town over which they have control. So that includes the fire department, the police department, DPW, and in particular working with the town administrator, with whom I have worked before, because when I was chair of the planning board. I worked with him quite extensively for different projects or problems that we needed to solve on behalf of the town. And of course, there's Long Beach. I have to better understand what we face as we go into the creation of new leases for Long Beach, if that be the case, or whatever we choose from the standpoint of the best interest of the town. And certainly there are other problems that we need to do with regard to the budget, whether it's looking at the future of the schools and trying to best establish how we're going to fund schools in the future beyond the override. So it's really, to some degree, a learning experience for the first 6 months. I have no committed ambition of saying I must do this or I will do this beyond what I've said, learning to better understand.
10 seconds.
And learning to better understand the mechanisms of the town. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Morrill.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight. This is a great idea. There's a lot of things that I'd like to look into for the first 6 months. The Long Beach Wall, of course, town roads can use a lot of help. But the most important thing, I think, at the beginning is to straighten out the situation with the Rockport Fire Department. It has run smoothly for decades. And over the last few months, there has been a major problem between the Board of Selectmen and their representatives with the fire department. It's an easy solution. Years ago, I was a selectman and we had a problem with the police department. That's basically why I was elected. We didn't have to call in anyone and pay him to look at the problems. We went up and talked to the fire chief, to the police chief, and worked out the problems ourselves. This can be done, but certainly within the first 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paulison, what's the first thing you want to accomplish during your first 6 months in office?
Well, the first few weeks, I imagine, would be to get familiar with the problems that we have at town hall. You don't get all the facts, being out in the street. I agree 100% with Mr. Morrill that the fire department situation is a top priority. I also don't think that the position that was created of community service coordinator, Mr. Schmink, is the right way to take all our town departments and let him run them. He doesn't have any experience in any of that kind of stuff. And it's like throwing a monkey wrench into the operation. The other departments have had no problem operating independently with the Board of Selectmen before he entered the picture. And it seems like since he entered the picture, there's been nothing but trouble. I understand, I was told, this is just, hearsay, but I hear there's a lot of friction in the police department. And that was one way to get Mr. Schmink out of the police department, was to send him down to town hall. Well, that's not the way you solve a situation. The selectmen need to do more to listen to the people in town. And right now, I don't think they're doing it. I guess that's enough for now.
Thank you, Mr. Paulison. And lastly, Ms. Wilkinson.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks to you and the League of Women Voters and 1623 Studios for taping. And thanks to the other candidates for joining us as well. So much to do all the time. And as we come out of the pandemic, I guess I would say 4 priorities. The first would be to continue with the reopening. And I think you mentioned in my bio that I'm leading the reopening committee, which we are supporting businesses and locals as we emerge from the pandemic. One of the main things we've done is to introduce the outdoor dining to the downtown area, which has proved to be a huge success. State legislation has continued that through the end of, I believe, November, but we are going to now work to make it permanent because it seems that locals and visitors alike love to eat outdoors, and Rockport is a beautiful place to do that. Second would be to continue our work with the new leadership in the fire department to move the fire department forward. I mean, I think everyone acknowledges that the fire department has had a rough year. It was rough on all of us. And I am committed to working with the new chief and the new leadership to really moving forward and letting the town, have the fire department that we deserve. And I fully support our volunteer fire department. I've never
10
done.
seconds.
Third would be housing, which I'm sure we'll get to later. And fourth which would be Long Beach, which obviously the 10-year leases are up in 2023. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we'll start with question 2. What are some ideas you have for developing affordable housing in Rockport? All right, and we'll start with Mr. Paulison.
Well, that's a hard question to answer because with the tax base in Rockport and the average value of a home in Rockport, there is no such thing as affordable housing. The only way we could get some affordable housing in town is with possibly some new housing projects, some developments that specify a certain number of units for affordable housing. But like I say, for our kids who are born and raised here, there is no such thing as an affordable housing unit that they could afford to buy in this town. And I think all the other candidates will agree with me that the influx of wealthy people buying up properties, paying too much money for them, they don't care about the schools, they don't care about our fire department or police department. All they want to do is come down here, spend their money. But in the meantime, they're ruining the housing for our own children. And I think that's wrong. And I think at this point right now, it's really a difficult thing to find a way to put affordable housing in the town of Rockport. I'm all for it 100%, I really am. But I think it's something that, unless somebody leaves us a few $1 million as seed money to start something, I don't think we could do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Ms. George, what are your ideas for, some ideas for developing affordable housing in Rockport?
About 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the Community Preservation Committee approved, and the voters approved money for an affordable housing study. And that will be going out for an RFP very shortly. And that will be looking at what is needed in Rockport, what people need, what people want. I think that's the first thing that we have to start working on. The planning board is also looking at, they have some mandates about housing and low income, medium income around the railroad station and areas like that. And we also need to further investigate the Mount Desert Island project that the school committee and planning board and folks looked at several years ago with Rob Lebo, that would look at and housing development that would be in perpetuity for town employees and would be passed on. I think those are some of the things we need to look at.
Great, thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
Sure. I don't want to obviously repeat what everyone said, but the Board of Selectmen is already working with the planning board on multiple projects. I believe we were notified yesterday that we received a grant, a federal grant, so we can now put an RFP out to create a housing production plan. The planning board is working on changing our bylaws regarding accessory dwellings, which would help current homeowners in Rockport to be able to rent out accessory dwellings. We are also working to update our bylaws to comply with new state laws to allow for affordable housing within a half mile of transit stations, so our train station. And then I think kind of closest to my heart, which we had started to work on before the pandemic, and now a group of us are getting together again, is to create an affordable housing trust, which is what Ruth mentioned, modeled off of the Mount Desert Island Housing Trust. And that is more aimed at workforce housing, which would be housing for tradespeople, teachers, police officers, people that all work really hard locally and make a decent salary and are just having trouble affording the home values, that are current right now in the real estate market. So that is really dear to me. I took a
10
trip
seconds.
and Herm joined us, and that's something that I'm committed to making a reality.
Thank you. Mr. Morrill.
Affordable housing has been a problem for years and years and years. And I think one of the ideas of the high density housing around the train station should be looked at, whether high density or not. Conversion of acquired housing that we have that we can change from single family to multifamily condos would be another way. And even the use of some of town properties that can be made available for affordable housing with multi-units, again, condoizing. I think that would be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lilja.
Yes, this has been a concern of mine. Let's see here. Okay, this has been a concern of mine for many years as director of the planning board, working with others on the planning board, in particular Cameron Smith. We work extensively at what could be done for the area around the train station, and in a sense worked prior to the demands now made by the state with regard to the zoning within a half-mile of the MBTA station. We had a grant under the Massachusetts Area Planning Commission, worked with them extensively for 3.5 years. To see that somewhat dry up. It did not go to completion as planned, but the basis has already been placed there. Now the state has come in with housing choice and is demanding that we change the zoning within a half-mile radius of the MBTA station to permit housing to the tune of 15 units per acre, which is going to mean that will be done because the state is demanding it. Otherwise, we will lose certain opportunities by the state. I did go to Mount Desert Island
10 seconds.
with the chair of the selectmen and others, and we did look at the housing trust, and it is a good approach, and it should be reactivated.
Thank you. Okay, on to question 3. What are some ideas you have for dealing with ocean rise and the need to strengthen infrastructure or to retreat? So ideas you have for dealing with ocean rise and the need to strengthen infrastructure or retreat. And we'll start with Mr. Morrill.
I'm not an expert on that, of course, and there's a lot of work to do on that. The Rockport Local Hazard Mitigation Committee has been tasked with studying that problem with climate change effects, rising tides, rainwater, wind, snow, how we're affected by that, big storms, what we need to do with our infrastructure to mitigate the amount of damage to the roadways, to the buildings, how our dams are doing. One's okay, one needs some work, and delivery of emergency medical services during whatever the hazard might be. So that is a big, long, involved study that these folks have done. And I think that we should follow that as a guideline and move forward from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilkinson.
Yeah, would you mind just repeating the question? For some reason, it cut out at the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
What are some ideas you have for dealing with ocean rise and the need to strengthen infrastructure or retreat?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so as Mr. Morrill said, the town just recently created a hazard mitigation plan, which the selectmen reviewed and signed off on. And admittedly, I'm not an expert in this either, but I've been working on this long enough to know that climate change is real and the ocean is rising, and that as elected officials and leaders in the community, it's our duty that absolutely every decision we make, whether it's paving a road or building a building or investing, tax money, we have to take it into consideration. Personally, I know that looking at Long Beach, the selectmen have taken off the table removing all of the cottages. I know that was a little bit of an issue at town meeting. And that comes from the fact that 154 homes are already in existence. And we do believe, and we've learned that there are lots of things that can be done there to mitigate the climate change as ocean rise as it comes, but also kind of embrace it. And I think that's what we need to do. But the key is to really plan and acknowledge it, and to acknowledge it with every decision that we make. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Paulson, what are some ideas you have for dealing with ocean rise and the need to strengthen infrastructure or retreat?
Well, ocean rise is a fact of life. It's happening little by little. I don't think you're going to see more than an inch or two in our lifetimes, but it's still something that's happening. The biggest problem is we're losing, especially in Rockport, we're losing the protection of the Sandy Bay breakwater, which little by little is getting knocked down, and it stops the huge ocean waves from coming in and beating the hell out of our shore. As far as retreating from the shore in Rockport, that ain't never going to happen. The richest, most powerful people in town live along the shore. They got the big fancy houses, and you don't think for 1 second they're going to give up their home and move away just because they're a little afraid of ocean rise. The reinforcement that we need to use behind our beaches, like down Back Beach and Front Beach and Long Beach, it needs to be built properly so that it takes into consideration, ocean rise. And it can't be constrained by the price of what it costs. It all boils down to money. There's all kinds of things you can do to limit the ocean rise effect, but it costs a lot of money. And most cities and towns, they rather wait till it happens than put the money up front and build a better
10
structure to
seconds.
protect here.
Great.
But ocean rise is here. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Mr. Lilia?
Yes, well, I agree with Sarah that the best approach is to deal with the issues as they in fact come along. I don't think that a major plan to try to reverse what is happening around us right now is going to be successful, because we are a small town on the coast. There are major cities on the coast that have many more needs than do we. So we need to prevent or interrupt those aspects of rising sea level that we can deal with, such as has been done over at Back Beach. And now there will be an additional or an extension to that Back Beach abutment. So I see the same for Bearskin Neck. If in fact it reaches the point where Bearskin Neck is flooding, then there may very well have to be some concrete walls. It won't be beautiful, such as the construction of granite piers in the past, because the money isn't there, but we will need to do it. And as far as Long Beach is concerned, if there's been a conclusion now that we can deal with the issues as we go along, that's fine. I'm in agreement with that.
Thank you. And Ms. George?
Yes, I think one of the first things that we need to get out into the public is looking at the GIS mapping that's been done by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission and different groups that have looked at it. One of our biggest areas is the infrastructure downtown in Barletta Park, where our sewer and water is. That is one of the lowest parts in Rockport. And when ocean rise comes, that will probably be one of the first things that will flood out, is the pump station down in Barletta Park. So those are the things. It's not going to come quickly, but those are the major things that we need to look at, in addition to our 3 harbors and the beaches, Long Beach seawall, and what we can do with the state and federal monies that we could be appropriated. Usually it's a 75% federal and the town has to pay 25%, but that's really bargain for what we could get from both of those agencies, and working with FEMA. And I think those are the hazardous mitigation plan also is addressing all of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I know some of you have mentioned this already, but we thought this was also this specific of Long Beach was important. So the next question is what should the fate of what should be the fate of Long Beach, and how should the town get there? And we'll start with Ms. Wilkinson.
I guess the fate of Long Beach. I mean, I hope that the cottages at Long Beach will be there for decades to come, as they have been. And I'm just in case people don't know, so Long Beach property owners have triple net leases, which means they pay rent for the land. Pay rent for the land that the cottages sit on, and they pay property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. I was on the board in 2013 when we updated the leases, which hadn't been updated in decades. And the rents alone on the land now bring over $1 million into the town per year. That combined with the property taxes brings in over $2.5 million per year. Since being elected on the board, I'm happy to say that I've enjoyed a productive, working relationship with the vast majority of property owners down in Long Beach. I live in the Long Beach neighborhood, and the fact that I can walk down there 365 days a year and walk onto the beach is the benefit of that is not lost on me. I've always been really clear with my priorities, and public access is an absolute necessity. I've always supported continuing leasing because I feel that financially it works out for the town.
10 seconds.
And we're allowed public access. So it's not that I'm not open to exploring the sale of the lots, but I would only ever be willing to really explore that seriously, if we were guaranteed public access forever in perpetuity.
Thank you. Mr. Paulison, what should be the fate of Long Beach and how should the town get there?
Well, the fate of Long Beach has been beat around town for years and years and years and years. And every different board of selectmen comes up with a different idea on how to handle it. There's always a fight. There's always I can't use this word on TV, but you got to remember one thing. These people are our neighbors. They pay lots of taxes. They also pay rent on the land that their house sits on. And up and foremost, they only get to use their property 8 months a year. You and all us here right now, we get to live in our place 12 months a year. So whatever our costs are, you spread it over 12 months. You take their costs and their fees and everything, and you spread it over 8 months, and they're taking a shellacking. The biggest thing that I've seen with this that's happened, I don't know how to cure it, is that the older families that have been there for years and years are being forced out due to the town raising costs and taxes and everything else down there. And somehow the Board of Selectmen has got to come to terms with these people so that they can enjoy their property. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it for 12 months, but at least the 8 that they're there, and come to some terms so these older families that own them aren't forced to sell them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lija.
Well, I've expressed the feeling that we should keep Long Beach, but that does not mean that we shouldn't look at the possibility of sales such as has taken place in Ipswich and with regard to Little Neck. The prospect of raising a lot of money for the needs of the town, which are extensive, is certainly a consideration that I think has to be looked at. My problem with raising such money or amounts of money is, will it be well spent? How can it be managed in a way that is to the benefit of all the town members? I know that the owners out there have expressed an interest in purchase of their land, such as has been done in Ipswich. So it's not a dead issue as far as they're concerned. It's more a matter of whether it's in the best interest of the town, given the fact that we would net a good deal of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. George?
I think that those 154 cottages that are on Long Beach are the same as any other people who live in Rockport, whether they live in Pigeon Cove, South End, downtown. They're property owners. They are residents. They love Rockport, and they shouldn't be penalized just because they live on the beach for 8 months. We're all in this together. We need to work on a solution. I think the biggest thing I see is working on the new leases that will expire in 2023. And I would really like to see in the new leases, if we could, a caveat that would protect the town and acknowledge to the residents down there about climate change, sea rise, and the dangers of what could happen to their cottages, and make sure that the town wasn't held liable for any damages for a big storm that took out the closest end to sort of Cape Hedge, where it's very, very precarious right now. I think those are things. I think also we do need to look at that wall. We need to look at working with FEMA and doing our due diligence and figuring out what we can do, and also
10 seconds.
protecting the marsh that filters everything in back of Long Beach. That's a very important ecosystem for the town and for our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrill?
Yeah, I was on the Board of Selectmen 30 years ago, and this was an issue back then also. I favor allowing the sale of the properties to the owners that are there now. They pay a lot of money to be down there, and yet they don't enjoy owning their own property. And I think that would be a good way to solve the problems that have been there for so many years. As far as the wall's concerned, that's everybody in Rockport's problem. And we need to pay whatever share we need to, but also make sure the federal government and the state government bear the brunt of it. But the properties need to be saved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question 5. What do you think is the best way to organize the public safety departments to provide the best and the most affordable services to the town? So the best way to organize the public safety departments to provide the best and the most affordable services to the town. And we'll start with Mr. Lilja.
The best way. Well, I suffer from not having been, or I'm currently not a member of the Board of Selectmen. So that my observations are based on the problems associated with the structure of the fire department, the organization, even of the police department, because I've heard complaints about management there. I've heard complaints that employees in general have difficulties throughout town with passing on comments for fear that those comments are going to be misinterpreted and that they don't prove to be a help either to the town or to the employee themselves. So it seems like there is a good deal of reorganization that needs to be done. Do I have the plan in my mind that is to be something that I think should be implemented? No, I think that I need to listen to those who have those services or responsibility for those services now to see what they suggest, and then try to draw some conclusions based on the overall input of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrill.
Well, I was on the fire department in Rockport for 20 years. I was on the ambulance service here quite a few years on the ambulance committee. And our emergency services have always delivered. It's only been in the last few months that things got messed up, if you want to say it that way. The Board of Selectmen have always had direct oversight of the fire and the police and so forth, and it should be that way now. The day-to-day operations of the police department are run by the chief. The day-to-day operations of the fire department should be run by the Board of Fire Engineers. We don't need emergency services director. We don't need a public safety commissioner. What we need is the way it was, because it worked. You'll find that when the department has a say in the way that things are run, they're run better. Morale is better. The services are better. We get more people in because it's being run the right way. So my idea is to go back to the way it was before the Board of Selectmen
10
decided
seconds.
to go through this whole range of oversight that it wasn't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. George, what do you think is the best way to organize the public safety departments to provide the best and the most affordable services to the town?
Well, I think our original concern was that there were a lot of departments that were a 1-2 small departments, animal control, harbor master, ambulance, fire, forest fire, all of those areas, that they needed to be sort of a little more cohesive, so they could work together, train together, and have that type of thing. The original thought was that it was going to be sort of a get everyone together, try to build some new structure, and then let it back to the way it was. That obviously did not work. We pulled that emergency services director position out when we found out, and got our first letter from the fire department. We acted immediately and took that position and put it on hold. And I think we're just reassessing what that is. I think for right now, everything is back to the way it was before that position was created. And I think it needs to stay there till we really look at what needs to be done. And hopefully we can get that study by that consulting company to come in and sort of give us an idea of what needs to be done for the town
10 seconds.
in emergency services, fire department, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's been a long year with emergency services. As Ruth stated, as soon as both she and I knew of the issues with the emergency services director position, we immediately put it on the next agenda and suspended the position. And the position has not been reinstated since. The goal of that position was, as Ruth said, to really pull the departments together and to really make it so that policies and procedures were consistent, trainings were consistent. The year is 2021, and we are dealing with things like social media policies. Things are very different now than they were 30 years ago. And I wish that I could agree with Mr. Morrill when he says that there weren't any issues when the department ran itself, but I've been on the board for 15 years and we've dealt with several issues in the department. So the goal of the emergency services director was to really support each department. But I agree, as soon as we found out that there were issues with it, we suspended the position. And now I would favor sitting down with the new leadership of the fire department and the leadership of each department and really working together to see what is a good formula and how the town can support those
10
departments.
seconds.
So, be current and be modern and have policies and procedures that are modern and appropriate and support our employees and our volunteers.
Thank you. Mr. Paulison.
Okay, here we go. First about this, I'm going to tell you, I agree with Mr. Morrill 100%. All these departments function fine before the Board of Selectmen, in their ultimate wisdom, created this public safety director job. And I don't think it was the right decision. I think at this point, they've removed the director. They should send him back to the police department where he come from and figure out what they're going to do to get the $120,000 back that they were paying him. From what I hear right now, I'm not 100% sure, but as far as I know, he may not be in the position, but he's still getting paid like he is. You know, it ran okay before. We don't need up those big jobs. It's not warranted. And this guy they put in there, he is positively not qualified to be there. And like I say, he's still getting paid. The biggest thing that happened when they created this position is they destroyed the morale of all the small departments that we had. Fire department, harbor department, the dog catcher department, you know, the other departments that all worked independently and with the selectmen. All of a sudden they got somebody that doesn't know anything about what they do and he's in charge. And you try to run a department when you're dealing with somebody that doesn't
10
understand
seconds.
what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Okay, let's shoot for one more question, maybe two, if we can squeeze it in. But I also want to give you all time for your closing remarks. So let's go to what are some ideas you have for dealing with the demographic trends in Rockport? Ideas you have for dealing with the demographic trends in Rockport. And we'll start with Ms. Wilkinson.
That's a great question. I actually was in a meeting the other night for to try and get the school override passed, which is also on the ballot for June 22nd. And what amazed me was the people in the meeting were all ages. It was parents and grandparents And one of the grandparents in the meeting said that I want Rockport to stay a multi-generational thriving community. And I think that is so important. My next door neighbor who passed away this past winter said to me, Sarah, I will always support the schools. I'm 80 years old, but I will always support the schools because I'm supporting the town and the schools for generations from now and not the current generation. And I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind. And in doing that, things like supporting a school override, supporting a school, supporting cultural activities. Since I've been on the board, I helped to create Music at the Beach, which I will tell you, Monday nights in Rockport all summer, we have people of all ages. There are grandparents dancing with grandchildren, young couples just enjoying Rockport, enjoying music. We have
10 seconds.
Motif number 1 day. I think anything that we can do to support all generations living here is worth it.
Thank you. Mr. Paulison.
Well, right now, our population is going up a little bit. We have a broad span of our population between elderly, working folks, younger parents. The schools are milking us blind. The school population is going down. The one thing that we really have to address, and you're all probably going to hate me when I say this, is it's time for school choice to go away. We send out 5 kids, we take in 100. Every one of those 100 kids we take in, we spend $17,000 to educate them. Why do we have to spend that kind of money to educate the kids from another town? Let their own towns take care of it. You know, and as far as overrides go, they want an override to refill their slush fund. That's not maybe the proper word, but you get the picture. If this was a crisis, that something desperate was going to happen, they were going to lay off teachers, or they were going to cut back curricula on the kids, then maybe an override might be possible. But what's the matter with considering a one-time exemption? You give them the $700,000 they want one time this year. You take it and you live with it. You don't get 700 this year, 700
10
next year,
seconds.
the year after, and 700 the year after. You know,
Thank you,
it's
Mr.
just
Paulison.
good fiscal economy.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson, I saw you react. Did you want 30 seconds? Sure.
Sure. Anyone who thinks that school choice students cost the town, and I know there is a kind of a fake news website up that states this and has all kinds of data sheets, but anyone who thinks this should actually, or is wondering, should reach out to Rob Lebo, the superintendent, who has
10 seconds.
data that shows that school choice students fill seats that are available in the classes. We aren't adding staff or classes, and school choice adds to the town, is a win financially and non-financially. And the benefits that we get by having school choice students in our community are you can't even put a price tag on it.
Thank you. Mr. Morrill.
Well, I guess this ends up being a question about the schools instead of demographics, as it looks. But we have 2,000 less people now than we did in 1990. And yet we're spending a lot more money on the different public services like schools. We need schools, of course. We need good schools. But every time you vote for an override, it's not just for 1 year. It goes on and on and on in perpetuity. So their plan again is in 5 years to do another override. Then that's for forever also. It's got to stop sometime. There's got to be other ways cutting the budget. I'm actually in favor of the override this time. But from this point on, we really need to look at the spending habits of the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lilia.
Well, I'll go back to the demographic issue because the changing demographics is at the basis of our problems associated with the schools. there are more people settling here who have money, can afford to buy housing and to do with the housing as they see fit, but essentially raising the price level of any housing in town. Therefore, the children of residents and young marrieds cannot afford to move into town. So we need to look for land in town where in fact we can have not only low-income housing, but that's going to be dictated by the choice of the state of Massachusetts, as they have said, within a half-mile radius of the MBTA station. But we also need other land for moderate income housing. It is a necessity if in fact we want a multifaceted, multi-generational population in Rockport. Everyone says that they appreciate the aspects of that, but it won't prevail if in fact something isn't done to ensure that people who grow up in town can afford to live in town. And we just have to take the chance and develop the land, or allow a builder to develop the land. But we need to find the land. There's land here to do that very thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. George?
Yes, about the changing demographics. I grew up on the Headlands as a kid, and there were probably, on my street on Harrison Avenue, there were probably 4 houses that had people year round, and all the other ones were summer. 90% of up on the Headlands, Old Garden Beach, out in that area were all summer residents. It really, when you look at it from way back in the 50s and 60s, hasn't changed that much of summer people. Yes, they're wealthier, but times have changed. There are, with this COVID, I think we have an opportunity. You know, you see a house in Rockport and it's on the market for less than 2 weeks right now. And there are young families. The cost that young kids get at a job now graduating from college, they can make well over 150, 200,000 easily. And these people are looking now at COVID, looking at a small, beautiful community like Rockport with a good school system to come here and work from home. They don't have to work in a big city. They don't have to work in Boston or Cambridge or any place. They can work from home. And, you know, just as an example,
10 seconds.
the house across from me sold for, I think, 3 million. And they have 2 small toddlers in the yard playing. Those are some of the demographics that I think are going to help Rockport.
Thank you. Right, we have a few more questions, but we are heading towards 6 o'clock. And I promised you we would keep it as close to an hour as we can. So I'd like to give each of you 2 minutes for final statements. All right. And we'll start with Ms. George.
Thank you, Hannah, very much. And thank you, 1623, for doing this. I would like to continue on the Board of Selectmen. I've only been on it 3 years. Last year I was the vice chair. This year I was the chairperson. I've tried, it's been a difficult year with COVID and a lot of the concerns we've had with the fire department and other issues this year. But I've tried to be very open and responsive at the meetings, letting people give us their opinions, thanking them for their concerns, and working with people. Sometimes you can't solve problems in a month, 2 months. A lot of things lately are prohibited to talk about, whether they're a personnel item or a lawsuit that's pending, and everything has to be judged of when we can speak and what we can talk about. We have a lot to do in this town. We have to work on getting our new DPW building facility built for our employees who work, you know, 24/7 in any type of emergency. They're here, those DPWs, in a snowstorm, in the summer or whatever. They're there to help us, whether it's water, sewer, whatever the problem is, plowing. We've got to get that going. We've got to look about climate change. We've got to look about Long Beach and the leases and the seawall. We've got to look about infrastructure. We've got to look about housing. How can we get more people out here? You know, I agree. We need to start looking at accessory dwellings for people. A perfect example is a neighbor put an apartment over the garage for an in-law, I think that's absolutely appropriate. People need to do that. People did it years ago. We need to do that in Rockport. And
10
I
seconds.
really enjoy working for the town. I have been the leader in the COVID vaccines. I made sure that people got their vaccines at all the housings for the elderly. I did probably 100 home visits for people, and we're going to start doing COVID vaccines at the community house every Saturday from 10 to 12 for any walk-ins.
Thank
for the-
you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lilia.
Yes, second. I would like to emphasize that there are many unresolved, actually first. Dr. Kimberley, I'd like to thank you and the League of Women Voters for your efforts associated with this. And going back to the unresolved issues, which include Long Beach and the declining school age population, low-income housing, which needs to be increased from the current approximately 3.9% to 10% as the state is demanding. And also an interest in moderate income housing for young marrieds, young families, so that there is a basis for maintaining the schools as currently construed without doing anything else that's major, because there is a need for school-age children coming from Rockport. And then there's the Cape Ann-Tool, which no one mentions, but I see that as an unresolved problem, which has to be resolved in one way or another. So I bring to the situation a long-term perspective. I grew up in the town. My grandfather settled here in 1890s. My father was a builder here in town. So I have a lot of tie to the town. I provide a fresh perspective. I also provide a perspective that is based on my training in science, an analytical approach to things that probably is not a part of the reasoning of any of the other current members of the board. And also, while I was chair of the planning board, we did resolve issues that were major, that were unresolved by the Board of Selectmen. And that includes, what do we do about pot shops? We wrote the bylaws. Mega houses, we wrote the bylaws. The private helicopter use in town, we wrote the bylaws. So it isn't that I haven't addressed major issues before.
10 seconds.
Love to be a part of resolving the future issues and the current issues of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrill.
Yes, I want to thank you again also, Dr. Kimberley, for making this pretty easy and enjoyable. And the other candidates too. I have respect for all of you, even though sometimes I may disagree. Sometimes good people make bad decisions, and that's what I believe right now. I'm not a one issue candidate, although the emergency service is very important to me and needs to be addressed. It was said that they want to do a study to see what's wrong with the fire department at a cost to us of over $100,000. Well, this same company went into Manchester by the Sea to do a study, and now they have a full-time department. Imagine what that costs. The town administrator, I haven't talked to him yet. I have no idea what he thinks about anything, but the idea of a town administrator came from the administration that when I was here the first time. And the reason for the town administrator was to be an aid to the Board of Selectmen. The selectmen make policy, and then the town administrator follows that policy and works with the other committees. He doesn't make policy himself. He shouldn't be on boards. He should be just a vehicle to get the information from us to the committees and from the committees back to the Board of Selectmen. I've been here a long time, been on many boards. Wasn't really sure I wanted to come and be a selectman
10
and get
seconds.
with the problems that are here. I thought I'd give it a shot one time to see if we can solve these problems. And I'm going to do it for one term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrill. Mr. Paulison.
I must be last but not least.
Second to last.
First thing I want to do is thank Ruthie for getting me my shots, even though the second one hurt like hell.
Yay.
Woo!
The first thing I want to comment on is these overrides. We got to start doing away with overrides. It's not right. Why not just totally do away with overrides, never have one again, but consider one-time exemptions, which I know are legal. If they need something for a specific purpose or a tragedy or a crisis, you give them the money for 1 year. You don't give them 700 this year, 700 next year, 700 next year. Like Craig said, it goes on forever. When does it stop? You know, the issues, it seems like the Board of Selectmen have to deal with, they seem like they never change. It's the same ones year after year after year. We need to straighten it out so that some of these issues get straightened out once and for all, or for a reasonable time period. It don't seem to be happening with the current board.
Okay.
When are we going to open the town offices? We ought to open them right away. People want to do business face to face. They don't want to do business with all this other stuff, you know, with Zoom. I'm quite uncomfortable with it. I'm trying my best here to deal with it. And my last thing is to keep our volunteer fire department strong and totally support them in every means possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkinson, last but not least.
Thank you so much. And thanks again to everyone. So I guess I would have to say that besides my family and friends, without a doubt, my greatest pleasure and honor of my life comes from my service to the town. I know it sounds totally crazy, but whenever a resident reaches out and needs help or has a situation, I love either helping them myself or if I can help them, connecting them with someone who can. I'm enormously proud of how the town has operated since I've been on the board. We continue to have the lowest tax rate in all of Essex County. This past year, we just received over $2 million free cash, which is the greatest amount we've ever received. That money will go, a lot of it straight towards our emergency services to buy a new ambulance, a new forest fire truck, new Jaws of Life. Since I've been on the board, we've sold tax title properties, we've preserved precious open spaces. And as I talked about earlier, I'm currently leading the reopening committee and just created the outdoor dining program. This past year through the pandemic has been nothing short of extraordinary. All of our goals and plans for 2020 were halted in the blink of an eye. We went from regular meetings to meeting 3 or 4 nights a week, discussing COVID case numbers and quarantines. None of us expected that. But we tackled all of these issues as a team with the Board of Health. We arranged for in-town COVID testing, and last spring we created regulations that would keep Rockport open for business and supported our business owners, many of them who reported their best, most successful season in years. We, led by Ruth and her team, created an incredible local vaccination program. I think it's amazing to share that currently over 95% of Rockporters over age 65 are fully vaccinated.
10 seconds.
Unheard of. I'm extremely proud to have played a small part in this, and I ask for your vote on June 22nd. This last year has taught me that as a town, we can get through absolutely anything, and life here can get even better.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank our 5 candidates for participating in this Zoom debate, and also 1623 Studios for airing it. It will be posted to the League of Women Voters Cape Ann website, as well as 1623 Studios. But I encourage you all to feel free to share the recorded debate on your social media and get as many eyes on it as possible. Our last Zoom debate in Rockport seemed to spread like wildfire through social media. So that was really great. And Rockporters, don't forget to vote. Early voting starts at Saturday, June 12th at 8. There's also early voting on Monday, June 14th, and Tuesday, June 15th. The Rockport town election is Tuesday, June 22nd. And it would be fantastic if everyone went out and voted. Thank you all so very much.